Welcome to the Intern Whisperer Live, the show all about the future of innovation in industries, entrepreneur stories, inspiring leaders, and of course, internships. Reminder listeners, you can call us live on the air, and the phone number is 407-582-2906. You can also chat with us online through Intern Pursuit's Facebook Live chat. Coming up on this episode, we have David, I want to pronounce the name right, Miklas, David Miklas, on employment and labor attorney. Students who want to work with Intern Pursuit, better yet, can go to internpursuit.tech and create your free profile to be matched. We invite employers of all types and sizes to be a part of our early adopter beta program. Early adopter employers receive small special pricing until December 2019. If you want to learn more, shoot us an email at info@internpursuit.tech.
All right, so where can you find Intern Pursuit? You can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Yay, YouTube! And you can also find our Intern Pursuit game on Facebook and Twitter, and you can go to our game and play it at internpursuit.games, Games. Just making sure you know that. You can watch us live on Facebook, and be sure to follow Intern Pursuit. And then you can listen to us live on Valencia College Radio. You can download Valencia College Radio's app on Google Play and search for Valencia College Radio to have that in your phone. You can look for Intern Pursuit on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, Podbean, and on the podcast channels. And I said Intern Pursuit. It's really Intern Whisperer, folks. You can also call us live on the air. The phone number is 407-582-2906. And chat with us online through Intern Pursuit's Facebook Live chat.
Orlando Devs is one of our patrons. They are a community of software developers in Orlando, Florida. Whether you love writing code or are just getting started, you're welcome there. Their website is orlandodevs.com. Thank you, Orlando Devs, for being a patron of the Intern Whisperer.
All right, so welcome, David, to the Intern Whisperer. We're so happy that you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so tell our listeners a little bit about what does an employment and labor attorney do? Why did you go into this field? Where did you go to school? All of those fun things.
Sure. Well, I did my undergraduate and law degree from the University of Florida.
Go Gators.
And, yes. And when I was in law school, I actually did a summer clerkship, is what they call it in law school. It's essentially an internship, except there's no college credit. And I was fortunate enough at that time to clerk for an attorney who did practice labor and employment law. So at that point, I realized I did like this area of law. So then when I was about to graduate, I solely attempted to get a job working in this specific field, and I've done it for 20 years. I've been fortunate that I didn't have to bounce around or just stumble into a type of law. To me, it's always been exciting, so I enjoy this kind of law. And what labor and employment attorneys do, a lot of people call themselves labor and employment attorneys, but most of them just do employment law. Labor law usually involves unions, and down in Florida, that's not too big of a deal unless you're in a public sector like the police or the city or a county or school district. But employment law is what you typically think of for discrimination, harassment, wages, overtime, minimum wage, things like that, trying to keep employers out of trouble and not getting sued. And if they do get sued, then I defend them. I don't sue. I never represent the plaintiff, the employee, but plenty of attorneys do.
Ah, interesting. So I'm also curious, not one of the questions I shared with you, but when you chose the field of law, was it because somebody in your family is an attorney?
Nope, not at all. In fact, I had my undergraduate degree in criminal justice, which has nothing to do whatsoever with anything I do in my career. When I ended up with a 4-year degree, I could have gone to be a police officer or to go to the FBI, or I honestly didn't feel like getting shot. So I chose to go to law school. It had nothing to do with family members being in law or anything like that. In fact, most of my contemporaries that were in law school with me have degrees in almost everything. You don't have to have it I know some schools have what they call pre-law degrees. UF didn't. And frankly, you don't need any kind of degree. The biggest thing they care about is your ability to think, perform well on the LSAT, and your GPA. So you can have a degree in anything.
Okay, so one of the things, I spent 2 years at University of Florida, so that's why I went Go Gators.
Oh, go Gators. That's right.
Yeah, and I was a criminal justice major also, but I was going to transfer up to FSU, which they had a criminal justice program also. I didn't know that Florida had it, but I was just trying to get away from home as far as I could, honestly. So that was part of it. Anyway, one of the things that I liked about the University of Florida campus, and I don't know about yourself, but it seemed almost ageless. The only people that got older were the professors. Everything else stayed the same. Just as
Yes,
an
that's true.
observation.
Yes, I've gone back for some football games, and I'm going up next week for a speaking presentation that I'll be doing. But I love going back and seeing the campus and reliving my good old days.
Yeah. The museums that they had up there were really nice. The Butterfly Museum and all of that stuff.
Yep.
Anyway, I digress. So, since you did this clerkship, how do you think, and have you ever had a law clerk work with you before?
I have. I have used a couple different law students when I first opened my law practice, because I had practiced with an established firm for 17 years, and then when the managing partner retired, we decided to close that firm up, and I opened my own firm a couple years ago. And at that point, it was just me solo, and I had a lot of work, and I needed some assistance researching. So I reached out to various law schools in Florida, and I got a couple of different law students, and they helped me. I have a book that I'm a co-author of, and every year I have to update thousands of legal citations. So I use the law students to help me with that, and also some general legal research that they were able to help me with.
Okay, so now you said a book that you've also co-authored. Tell us about the book.
Oh, it's it's a legal treatise. It's called Employment. It's Employment in Florida, and it goes through everything. But there's a lot of citations to law, so it's not like your average book. If you just go to HR Florida conference and a paperback, I mean, this is like a $300 book. It's like a legal book. It's not too exciting, but if
You're saying it's something that attorneys would read, not the general public? Okay, I gotcha.
Yes, and actually it is published and it's available on Lexis. So any attorney with Lexis, when they do legal research, if you have an option to look at actual cases, and then there's also secondary authorities, and that's what these legal treatises are. And various times when I do research, my own book pops up.
Oh, that's cool. That must make you feel really good. I know that when I taught in a college and I saw my name over there on the shelf when people were supposed to buy books at that time, it's like, oh my God, look, there's my name. It says professor right in front of it. It's pretty exciting.
Yes, yeah, that is neat.
Yeah, and I got to set up my own syllabus too. So that's cool. Well, congratulations. That's really a big deal. So.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
And I've actually written probably, I don't know, 400 or 500 articles at this point. Ever since I was a lawyer, one of the things I was tasked with when I was even a baby lawyer was writing newsletter articles for all of our clients. And every single month, we'd have to write 4, 5, 6 articles. And at that time, we just sent them out to our own clients. And this is back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And since then, since I've opened my own firm, I basically publish this same material that I sent out to my clients, but I publish it on my blog, and I also share it on social media and various different places. So the same article is able to get recycled multiple times, and basically a broader audience has access to it now than before.
Very good. Very good. I know I'm going to be doing the same thing on some of my blog articles. It's time the topic is still relevant, but it needs to have a refreshed appearance. So I get what you're saying there. What do you think that students should know about going into the law field? Because one of the things I was told was that in America, there's one attorney to every 5 people. And then you could go to some other country and, you'd have a better a better opportunity. I don't know if that's true or not. That was like a while back, but it seems like a lot of people are still going to law school. So, what do you think you would tell them about law school?
Well, it, this is a tough one because I see it from the perspective of a practicing attorney, and there's a lot of competition out there. There's a ton of lawyers. There's 100,000 lawyers in Florida, so that there's plenty of lawyers. But on the flip side, every month, us lawyers get articles from the Florida bar telling us how there's still a bunch of people that don't have representation. So I'm not real sure. I'm going to be critical that there's too many lawyers in Florida, but it sure is a moneymaker for the university. So that's why there's so many universities that have law schools and law programs. But there are a lot. I think the biggest thing that most law students don't realize is that not everyone is making a ton of money. There are plenty of lawyers that come out, first of all, with massive debt. So even if you are making a lot of money, you're paying a lot in student loans repayment. But there's a lot of lawyers, public defenders, Florida Rural Legal Services, prosecutors that really don't make anywhere near the money that most people think lawyers make. And that's probably the biggest surprise that students don't realize. I mean, there's plenty of people that make a lot of money, but the vast majority of surprise, I think, happens with when you come out of school with massive debt and you're not making the money that you imagine that you might have made.
Yeah, and I think that the reason why there's a perception is a lot of reasons. First, they watch shows on TV.
TV shows, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, everybody is like living this opulent lifestyle, so there's a misperception there. Secondly, I agree about the whole cost to go to law school. They aren't paying attention to that for sure. The third thing that I don't think that people take into account, I know you mentioned that there's a shortage of people that are seeking representation. They may not be able to pay the fees that an attorney charges, so you usually go the route of public defender or state attorney, which is set by the government. So there's a number of factors that are being weighed there. And then some of the areas of law are not quite as fun as others, like, domestic, anything that's in the domestic area, filing for divorce.
And actually, my wife, I met her in law school, and she is a prosecutor. She used to be a prosecutor, and then after we had our children, she decided to go back to law, but change types of law, and she does family law, exactly what you're talking about. It's divorce and custody. And I think I certainly could never do that. I don't have the tolerance for that, the patience. I just don't connect with people that way. And but she does. Her undergraduate degree is in psychology, so it's a good fit for her. And not everyone can do all types of law. Some types of law would be extremely boring to me. Drafting wills and doing that type of stuff, or just drafting contracts. I wouldn't be able to do that. That would be too boring. But there's so many different types of law that there's definitely something for everyone.
I agree. So what would you tell your 20-year-old self that's going through college now? Knowing what you know now, it's like years later, what would you go and tell yourself that, gee, I wish I had known that?
Well, a couple different things. First of all, I definitely would get on LinkedIn. I wouldn't waste my time, or I wouldn't waste as much time on things like Snapchat, because when you're going to be getting a job, everyone to help you get a job and your prospects are going to be on LinkedIn anyway. So you need to build up a LinkedIn profile. You need to be, I would tell myself to sanitize all my other social media platforms. Obviously, people make mistakes. They're young. They post pictures that later on they may regret. But if you're even thinking about looking for a job, you can't have pictures of you smoking a bong or doing a keg stand or crazy things like that.
Yeah.
I tell myself, don't waste time with garbage jobs. I would strive to get a real good experience, even if involved little or no money. I spent a lot of time doing, blue collar work because I was able to get money. But at the end of the day, it didn't really help me advance my career. And the few jobs that I did take where I made very little money, those were the ones that helped my career the most when I was clerking for a lawyer. I clerked for several lawyers, but I was just a runner. But just being, at that time, you actually had to run from the law firm to the courthouse to file paper documents. Now you don't do any of that kind of stuff anymore. Everything's on the computer. But there's still low-level jobs like that law firms need. And just being around someone in your field, even if it's not a lawyer in any kind of field, just being around those people that actually do that every day, that's invaluable experience.
I agree, because there's that place of being exposed to the jargon, being exposed to what does it look like to work in a law firm. You can just, do the observation side of it and learn a whole lot that way. So I would agree with you. Let's see.
Oh, one more thing. One thing that I think a lot of people don't realize about law, in addition to maybe not everyone making so much money, is that lawyers in general are extremely slow to change. This is one of the few fields that they still use fax machines.
No way.
I don't have a fax machine in my office, but 3 years ago, our firm did have a fax machine. And I know medical professionals still have it, and so does insurance agents. But besides that, in fact, I've only had 3 requests in the last 3 years for my fax number. And once I chose not to do it because it's a waste. Anyone that wants to fax you something can scan it in and email it to you, or put it in Dropbox, even if you encrypt it. There's a lot of different options, and frankly, I just shut down the fax line, and I just don't use that anymore. But plenty of lawyers do, and they're just like dinosaurs, and they're kicking and screaming. I mean, there was a 10-year fight for lawyers that didn't want to file documents electronically in Florida state courts. And we've been doing that in federal court, and it's a lot easier. But there's a lot of lawyers in Florida that hated it and fought it, and they're kicking and screaming into the 21st century.
Well, the government, I know that they still use fax machines, because I've had to send stuff in, whether it was student loans, it was the IRS, if it was getting the health insurance. They always say, well, we want you to fax it. I said, nobody has a fax machine anymore. Where do you think I'm going to get that? They, well, you got to go find it. I said, don't you scan it, and can't I email it to you? Oh, yeah, well, you can do that. That's like the second choice they give you. They would still want you to fax.
Yes.
It's ridiculous.
And I mean, that's just one example, but there's a lot of different kinds of technology. I mean, most law firms have a website now. 5, 6, 7 years ago, I don't even know if most of them had websites. And if they do, they're paying outrageous rates for bare bones, clunky websites that, have 4 or 5 pages, and that's it. So, I mean, those are the kinds of things where, they get a bundle, and it's part of either the yellow pages, or it's part of, something where you have your legal research, and they think that they're getting a good deal because all the other lawyers are doing the same thing. And not everyone's doing it, but a lot of them are still doing that.
Yeah, I agree. I know you're a part of Disrupt HR, so tell our listeners about that. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it when you were doing that. You do a lot of public speaking at really cool events, and let's give a shout out to that organization.
Sure. Actually, yes, it's global at this point. I know they have them in England and Scotland and all over. I've spoken at Disrupt Orlando twice. It's called Disrupt HR, and then I've also spoken at Disrupt Gainesville, and they just started one called Disrupt Sarasota, and I'm slated to speak at that one. And basically, the concept is, instead of like my typical presentation is about an hour, a 60-minute presentation. And, anyone that goes to any kind of CLEs or, any kind of credits is used to that. The concept of the Disrupt setting is where you get 10 speakers in an hour. So each speaker only has 5 minutes. You only have 20 slides in your PowerPoint, and you have no control. It automatically advances the slides for you every 15 seconds, and it's a completely different type of presentation.
No, it's one that they do. It's like, I think it's in Japan, and it's like Pachaka Chuka, something like that.
Yes, it's similar to that, yes. Yeah,
it sounds like Pikachu, but it's not that. But yeah, that's really intense too, because
it's weird because I create a new presentation for any new Disrupt that I'm doing in the future, And I will spend more time on that 5-minute presentation than I do for an hour-long presentation. It's very demanding if you want to pull it off right. In fact, I was very critical in my last one, but when I watched it back, it was fine. But I lost track of a slide. I mean, I was a couple seconds over, and I mean, it's very challenging. But plus you have to build in a little bit of time if the audience laughs. So you only get 5 minutes.
Wow. So
yeah, but the whole concept is that you're supposed to bring up something that's disruptive to the field of human resources. So like it's basically to get you thinking. And 5 minutes is enough to do that. So when you leave the room and you heard 10 people speaking, hopefully 6, 7, 8 of them are giving you something to think about.
So what did you speak about?
The last time I spoke about how recruiting or hiring online using social media can get employers sued. And it focused on most employers, hiring managers or recruiters will look someone up on Facebook or LinkedIn or some kind of social media. And it happens all the time. The vast majority of hiring managers do this, and it's fairly dangerous. There was a case out of Kentucky where a gentleman sued and ended up getting $125,000 because they thought he was a certain religion, and they didn't hire him based on that, and it turned out they were completely wrong. But because of that, he was able to sue them under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. And a lot of people don't even realize that there's a liability out there. So that's the reason I wanted to bring that up, because it's so prevalent to look someone up, and most people have no clue that there is a danger to doing it if they don't do it in a certain way.
So what tips are there that you could share with our listeners about how to do it in the proper way?
Well, you can use an outside third party, in which case that they give certain authorizations and notices. Or if you're going to do it yourself internally, the actual person who's in charge of hiring should not be the one looking it up. It could be a different individual who's divorced from the actual interview process, so that they can't exclude a candidate, or simply you don't look them up until after you've given them the job offer. And these are a lot of things that people don't like to hear. They've been doing this for a few years, and they think it's very effective, and they're not willing to change. And it's going to take a couple more companies to get sued and HR directors to get fired before I think more people start realizing the risk.
So they're using that like in place of maybe a criminal background check is what they're supposedly doing, but it's more of a mechanism that actually increases more bias.
Absolutely. In fact, there was just last week, this woman applied for a job, and the hiring company looked her up on Instagram and found a picture of her in a bikini, and then shamed her. And they posted that picture of her on the company's website and said, public service announcement: if you apply for a job, don't have this on your Instagram account. I mean, and then they ended up shutting down all their social media because of the backlash. I mean, it completely hurt that company's reputation. And this just happened. I know Ricky Baez talked about it on his podcast. So yeah, this is a dangerous area.
Oh my gosh. Sydney, you're shaking your head no. Why? Talk to me.
Maybe it'll be an unpopular millennial, I just want to have fun opinion. But why would they shame her just for having a bikini pic? Like, I'm trying to understand. Like, I get you want your employees to have a professional look, right? Yeah. Okay, I understand that. What company was this? Like, what was the business again? Like, was it like law or what?
No, I think it was it was PR.
Okay.
But it wasn't like she said, hey, here's a picture of me during her application process.
Right.
It just said, hey, if you're on social media, share, sign up or tag us or whatever. So she did. It's not like she intentionally shared any of those specific pictures with the employer, but they went out of their way to hunt them down. And yeah, I think it's crazy that they did that.
Yeah, and she wanted a job with them.
Yeah.
Not
okay.
anymore.
What's wrong with work-life balance? So like should she not post any pictures of herself in a two-piece bikini at all? Like, what if we just didn't sexualize so much and that's just what she wore to the beach that day? Like, why is it that big of a deal? But I say that, but I also understand why people would think that, because they want a conservative and, like, she wasn't trying to work for Instagram. If she worked for Instagram, well, then maybe.
Well, if she worked for a bathing suit company, that'd be one thing.
Exactly. So I guess they want your post to be relevant to their company.
Yeah. I think this is where the employer might be coming from, because I used to look at social feeds and I'd go, I don't know, they're just being ridiculous, that was my opinion.
Yes.
But what I was looking for, if there was anything that was biases that could get me in trouble, that's really more of what I was paying attention to. Is there, were they saying anything that was inappropriate, lots of bad words, things of that nature? And I use bad words, but in my own, I don't put it on the web for anybody to see. And then the other thing is what somebody puts out there, it is potentially, as the employer, I'm sitting here going, okay, if they're putting their personal life out there, would they be doing that with the company business? How would they even show that they have any type of a clue where to draw the line in the sand? So maybe that's really what an employer could be thinking, but it can be anything.
Yeah, I just think in terms of on the scale of ridiculous things to put on the internet, I don't think a picture of you in your bathing suit at the beach, where it is appropriate to wear a bathing suit, is that big of a deal.
I agree with you, Cindy.
Yeah, it's just really not. And also, I think we should allow employees to have a personal life. Like, why can't they have their own thing separate from their company? And that's why a lot of people put their Instagram and Facebooks on private.
Yeah,
and maybe everyone should do that.
Well, that's what David was saying earlier. He said that you should either sanitize it or, in this case,
I was
keep it
nodding
private.
my head very hard at sanitizing your social media, because people do post very ridiculous things.
Yeah,
and maybe if they just like made the setting so only I can see it and not everyone else, at least you won't feel like, oh, well, I have to delete all these fun memories. No, just hide them.
Yeah,
that way only you can see it.
Yeah, a private section. Okay. Well, so let's talk a minute, and then we're going to take a break. Where I met you, David, was when you and I went to Rollins College for a student SHRM chapter.
Yes.
And that was a conference there. We all had topics that we were speaking about. And I went, oh, my gosh, you're talking about internships. And that's where we met, and our professional relationship, because I'm going to say that, professional relationship, too, began flourishing there. So one of the things that I liked is that you were talking about the 7 criteria that are required for having an unpaid internship that has real value. And I said, oh my gosh, we have to sit down and talk some more about that. So I saw that you tagged me in something where Wendy was mentioning the 7 criteria also, and you tagged Daniel. Daniel's been a guest on the show also.
Mm-hmm.
So is there any words of wisdom about those 7 criteria that you'd like to share right now?
Yeah, it's funny because I've written about this and I've posted some articles about this, and employers continue to get this wrong, and that they continue to just want free labor. It used to be a 6-factor test that the Department of Labor used until a couple appellate courts around the country said that they rejected it. And then the Department of Labor in 2018 announced that it was endorsing that new internship test, which basically focuses on the primary beneficiary factors. And in there are 7. And one of the key things is that the student really should be the primary beneficiary of the internship. It shouldn't be the employer getting free slave labor. And one way to show that is by giving the student feedback and providing a letter of recommendation that benefits the intern for future employment opportunities can be one. But the 2 biggest things out of that 7-factor test that I see employers getting wrong is that there is absolutely no tie whatsoever to the student's education or an educational institution. They're not trying to do it just during the summer or during a semester. They're not offering really any benefit to the student intern. They're just trying to get replacing a current employee, which is they're never going to be able to to do that legally without paying the employee at least minimum wage. And that's the whole point of it. If you're going to have an unpaid internship, it needs to follow the Department of Labor's guidance.
Yep, agreed. Absolutely agreed. All right, so we're going to take a little break. Sydney, if you would go ahead and do our second patron.
Okay, Starter Studios is a pioneering hub for innovative and tech-enabled entrepreneurs that empowers and provides resources for entrepreneurs, creatives, and
Innovators
to begin, grow, and flourish in Florida through community education programs, accelerators, funding, and collaborative workspaces. Starter Studio fosters a community serving as a platform for the ideas of the future. Their website is www.starterstudio.org. Thank you, Starter Studio, for being a patron of the Intern Whisperer Live.
All right, so we're back for part 2, and we're going to talk about what does the future of the legal industry look like and careers like 10 years out, 20 years out, if we could even imagine it. Like, will it be robots? No, I don't know. I don't think so, but I think that there's places where it could work. So, David, what do you think the future of the legal industry looks like?
Well, you mentioned robots, but I definitely think AI is going to have an impact. Ironically, it may actually decrease the money that some lawyers are able to make. It all depends on exactly how it's used. I do think that with time, with technology, I think that some types of law may disappear entirely. We're already seeing the commoditization of law right now, and it's not going to happen overnight because the legal profession is not going to allow it. They're tackling some of these innovators by charging them with unlicensed practice of law when they try to act like lawyers. But it's at some point things like contract drafting, I think, is going to go away, and you're just going to be able to plug in some empty blanks, and a contract's going to be spit out. And there's always going to be a spot for lawyers because whether that $50 contract is legally enforceable is something that we're going to fight about. But I definitely think that there's certain things that is going to happen with technology. I think that software is going to help lawyers by making their jobs more efficient, and I already see it now by automating repetitive certain tasks. I used to, an example, one of the things that I do for my clients is help them with employee handbooks. I either draft it or revise it. And at this point, it is far cheaper to draft a new employee handbook for a client from scratch than it is to review a current handbook. And I'm talking 10 times cheaper. Because if I have to review their employee handbook, let's say it's 50 pages, I have to read every single word in it because every word, has a meaning, and there can be illegal language in an employee handbook. And if you don't read it all, then you might miss it. So to read a 50-page handbook takes time, and most lawyers bill by the hour. Whereas if I draft one from scratch using certain technology and software, I can turn one out in a few hours. So the price I charge my clients is significantly less. The time I spend on it is significantly less.
So I know you said doing it from scratch, but there's a lot of programs out there now where it's like plug and play, because I've written business plans as an example, and you can just type in the name of the company, and then it populates in all of the appropriate areas, and then you can pick from a list of industries, and then that populates that. I'm just using it as an example.
Yes.
There are a lot of templates out there that do the same thing that are HR. However, I think it's exactly the case in point that you said. There were 6 criteria. I remember when there were 7, Obama changed it to 6. Then it went back to 7 after Obama went out of office. I don't know if that's any real relationship, but I just noticed it. So if you were using that as the guidelines, you could have the old criteria as part of your employee manual, and you really need to have an attorney that's making sure, in this instance, not only the handbook is correct, but, forms that you're using and any of those things. And while AI can certainly replace words, whether it's a pronoun or a key word like a company name. I don't think that there's anything that can replace the ability to read it and to really interpret what it actually means, because I can write the word from and I can write the word form. They're both correct. They sometimes spell check doesn't catch those things, but
That's
a
right.
human can. So I feel like that's the value of an attorney, is the ability to see those nuances and be able to protect the person.
I agree, and I'm not in any way suggesting the sky is falling, Chicken Little type thing. Lawyers are going to be here forever. They've been here for thousands of years, and they're going to continue because they're there to argue. And if you don't like the status quo and you don't like what's being done to you, you're going to argue somehow creatively that it's not right. And then there's a lawyer on the other side to argue that you're misunderstanding or misinterpreting the rule or the law or whatever. So although technology is going to change certain aspects of the law, lawyers are going to have to adapt. And I definitely think that, like, for instance, right now, some lawyers are texting their clients. Some, are communicating via social media, WhatsApp and different things like that. Some other ones don't, and they only deal with telephone or in-person face-to-face meetings. It all depends on the type of law. Some types of law don't lend themselves to the internet or to social media. Other types of law, like for instance, my type of law, it's very rare that I meet a client face-to-face in my office. I try and make it as convenient for my clients as possible. And 9 times out of 10, whatever issues they're running by me, we can do that over the phone. We can do it by Skype or by FaceTime. We can use technology. Some lawyers are kicking and screaming, and they're just not going to do it. And those are the ones that they're going to get passed over by the people that do adapt to the technology.
Well, I think you're raising an interesting question, because this is the first time in a long time where we've had 5 generations in the workforce. And that's significant, because I think those are the ones that you're talking about, whether it's the silent generation, the baby boomers. They're getting ready to do an exodus out of the workforce. That's going to leave a big hole in I think, in a lot of industries. And, millennials are the next generation that actually even surpasses baby boomers. So, in size, just in sheer numbers. So I feel like we're definitely going to see a big change in a number of places, not even just the legal field, but based on how that generation, what they grew up with, how they communicate with each other, and the key technology that, when I say what they grew up with, but that key technology that they were using, and if it's actually been innovative and transformed also. Facebook is a really good example to them.
Yeah, and actually I think you need to realize, and this isn't just limited to lawyers, but I think it's a good example that if you're in the field of law, your clients are people, and they're going to span all 5 of these generations that we're talking about. I've got clients that are in their 60s and 70s, and I need to communicate with them very differently than 20-year-olds. And lawyers that are successful are going to be the ones that can adapt and do it across those generations. And I did hear the work-life balance a few times, and it's ironic because I know especially the millennials and Gen Z are trumpeting this, but it's not all one-sided. There's a downside to doing that. If you work less, there's a really good chance that you probably are going to make less money. And sometimes that's fine, and you'd rather have the freedom or working from home. But some other times you may realize, well, shoot, I know so-and-so is doing this and they're making 60 grand and I'm only making 30 grand. Why is that? Well, maybe only working half as much. So, the work-life balance, it's a balance. It's not just, staying home or working a lot less. There's a downside to that financially sometimes. Now, that's not, across the board. I know plenty of people that are more effective working from home or working at midnight or whatever. But I think some people don't realize that certain professions do require certain amounts of work in order to make the amount of money that they're thinking they're going to make.
Yeah, and I think that there's this place of, when we talk about work-life balance, we as humans, we're made for relationships, and I don't think that people are as fulfilled and satisfied by working alone as much. because you become very isolated and you're not very socialized with just being around different personalities, behaviors, being patient, accommodating. All of those are really good qualities that you get from working with other people. But there's also this shared knowledge trust that comes in by working with people, and then it spans across a lot of generations because, nobody knows everything. And it really requires working with a lot of people to be able to understand, well, hey, I watched this article, I read this article, oh, and I saw this on TV or Hulu or whatever it is, and it was all about how laws changing. We'll use that as the example. And so you mentioned something earlier too, that people are filing documents electronically. They aren't using runners anymore. But there is part of the reason why the fax machine, I was told, the reason why the fax machine was still relevant and used in the courthouse is because there was a timestamp on it. And even though you can email something, it was coming from a real dedicated phone number versus somebody else's email account. And to me, the argument didn't make sense at all, because somebody could email the document in for me from my email account, but they could also fax it in from a fax machine, and to me it was still the same information, but they were trying to make an argument as to why the fax machine was still relevant. But they work in the government, so what can I say?
For me, the only reason I think fax machines are relevant is because it's much more secure than email. So if you're not using a VPN or you're not encrypting your emails, things like that, then fax machines will have it more secure. But there's still other steps you can take to have email secure. But like when we file documents in state and federal court, we essentially upload them over the internet through a secure portal, and there is a timestamp. It shows the exact time that you filed a document, because when I file a document in federal court, the deadline is midnight. So I don't have to get it to the courthouse when someone's working there by 4:30 or by 5 o'clock like I used to. Now I can file it at 11:30 at night if I want. Now, as a practical matter, if there's a problem uploading it, the help desk is closed. So most lawyers will still try and file it during the day because if there's a problem, they can pick up the phone and call the help desk to make sure that they can get through that. But I can file, and everyone can see what time I filed it, whether it's at 10 o'clock at night or 6 in the morning or whenever. And that is like gold. That timestamp is real important.
Oh, okay. Well, that was good. You explained that. That's good information there. So when you're looking at, aside from just filing electronically, I've seen a lot of software platforms that come out that are there to try and help attorneys communicate more effectively, working globally, like what you were just describing. Have you ever had any international clients, and how would that be different?
I don't. My practice is strictly Florida based. But for instance, I know that some of the software, or actually most of the software now, actually has what's called a client portal. And it's kind of like if you go to a doctor or if you go to Quest and get your blood taken. You can give a password. Sometimes it's two-factor authentication. But then you have a secure portal where you can go in and see your own medical records in the medical field. Well, lawyers have the same thing. We set this up with our clients through this new software, and you can have essentially secure communications with your client, and it's not being sent over email. It's going through a secure portal that's through our software. And sometimes it's not just sending email messages to our clients. Sometimes I may draft a proposed memo that I'm about to file, and I want the client to review it. In the old days, I would print it out and mail it, or more recently, you'd email it to the client, let them review it, and they could send you changes back, or then you call on the phone. Nowadays, you can just upload it to the portal, and the client can read it on their phone at 2 o'clock in the morning if they want, and get back to you that way. So that's an example of technology, how it's being used now. And another thing that's going forward for the future is alternative billing methods. For many, many years, the only way lawyers would bill is by the hour. And you hear lawyers charging $200, $400, $600 an hour, and you have no idea how much time it's going to take them to do something. And finally, just recently, lawyers in certain fields, not all lawyers, but certain lawyers in certain projects are now starting to move towards other alternative methods, such as flat fee billing or fixed rates or even capped fees. Like as an example, I used to charge an hourly rate to review employee handbooks. Now I've done it so much and I use software that I know how long it's going to take me to draft a new employee handbook from scratch. And I say from scratch, but it's using a template. So I can charge a flat fee. And then my client is not concerned about, oh, shoot, I want to pick up the phone and call Dave and talk about something for 5 minutes, but I don't want him to bill me. If you charge a flat fee, they're not concerned about, should I call him? Should I not call him? Because I don't want to pay a little bit here. So that's something that, I see going forward into the future rather than just the amorphous billable hour. Now, some things you're still going to bill by the hour, and some things are still going to be like a contingency. But I definitely see different alternate billing methods being more popular in the future.
Wow, that is really good news, because I have worked with some attorneys, and I know exactly what you're talking about when they would charge, and this wasn't unusual, anywhere from $500 to $1,000 an hour, especially if they were being an expert in a court of law. I think that's where most people think, oh, I can make big money. But that's built on years and years and years of experience. That's not just something that happened, as soon as they got out of law school or in the first couple of years. It takes time to build up that knowledge base.
Yes, and I mean, you can charge your clients whatever you want as long as it's ethical. But if they challenge you, then you're gonna have to prove essentially that you're worth that. And if you're ever successful in court and you get your attorney's fees awarded to you, the court only awards reasonable attorney's fees. And lawyers will fight over whether it should have taken you 4 hours to draft this document, and they also fight over whether you're really worth $400 an hour, or really you should only be billing at $165 an hour. So that's the kind of stuff. I mean, someone that's been doing it for 20 years, yeah, they're going to be worth more than someone fresh out of law school.
Well, we are at the end of our show here, so we are going to be doing our spotlight, so you can hold on that music there. We're going to say, Q, thank you very much. Q is our station manager. He lets us come into this great campus and be able to do our shows here. He keeps us all on the straight and narrow path. So thank you, Q. We really appreciate you. And we appreciate being on Valencia College East Campus radio studio. So thank you. Let's do some shout outs. Sydney.
I shout out Isabella for it's her birthday.
Oh, thank you.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Yeah, thank you. David, who is your shout out for?
I'm going to shout out to Leslie Miserak and Ricky Baez, the ones who are in charge of HR or Disrupt HR Orlando, since I just spoke there recently.
Yep, and they are awesome. Both of those people are really good. So Leslie and Ricky, we really enjoy everything that you're posting out there on the web. I know I enjoy those articles. And Leslie has done some really great workshops. I've not been able to sit in on them, but they are really, really good, and I've heard feedback from everybody around her. My shout out goes to all of my crew on the game team, on the software team, on the radio team, and on the marketing team and the graphics team. All of those people, they do a great job, and I just want to say thank you to all of them. And then if anybody wants to contact our show, that is like some really bizarre noises over there. You can contact us at info@internpursuit.tech. You can call us at 321-422-2166. And you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram. And you can also listen to us live on Valencia College Radio if you go and download that app. And as we close out this show, we want to thank you for listening to The Intern Whisperer.